The house is a quiet picture of suburban tranquility. Andrea, a seemingly devoted mother, preparing her children for school. But this is no ordinary Wednesday morning because events are going to unfold in a way that it's going to shatter into a terrifying horror. What could drive a loving mother to commit such an unthinkable crime of killing her 5 children? Now that we've set the scene for this tragic event, let's dive deeper into this heart-wrenching story of Andrea Yates and the devastating consequences of untreated mental illness. I want you to picture this. It's a quiet Wednesday morning in June 2001. The Yates family are living what seems to be an ordinary suburban life in Texas. Andrea is a mum with 5 young children: Noah 7, John 5, Paul 4, Luke 2, and Mary, a tiny baby of just 6 months old. Her husband, Rusty, a NASA engineer, has just left for work at 9 a.m. and Andrea is expecting her mother-in-law around 10 to lend a hand around the house. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing inside Andrea's head because between 9 a.m. and 10, the unthinkable happened. Andrea drowned each of her 5 children in the family bathtub. She then, with the exception of Noah, placed each child on the bed in the master bedroom. But here's the thing. Andrea's actions were based on a reality that existed in her mind only. For example, she placed Mary, her baby, next to John, the older brother, because in Andrea's mind, John had been a good protector and she believed he would watch over Mary even in death. It's heartbreaking to see these choices fueled by a distorted reality, because after taking these inconceivable steps, Andrea did 2 things. First, she called 911 and asked for the police. Not long after making the emergency call, the police arrived, and the words that came out of Andrea's mouth must have hit the officers like a ton of bricks, because she said to them outright, "I've killed my kids." And then she led the police officers into the master bedroom where her 4 children lay lifeless. The oldest child, Noah, was found in the bathtub. Now, Noah was 7 years old and he was most likely the strongest of all the children. Andrea was later to tell the police that Noah was hard to drown because he fought back. Sadly, Noah did get his head out of the water at one point and said, "I'm sorry, Mummy." Unlike the other children, Andrea never moved Noah from the bathtub. In between calling 911 and the police arriving, she phoned Rusty, her husband, and uttered these 2 words: "It's time." What Andrea was referring to was a verse from the book of Revelation. She believed that Armageddon was upon them and that Satan was lurking inside of her, tormenting her and the children. The logic of Andrea's thinking was that by drowning her children, she would save them from Satan, and then she would be executed for their deaths, and Satan would be vanquished as well. Doing this would save the innocent souls of her children from the fires of hell, and so they would not die by the hand of the devil himself. Andrea's love for her children was so fierce that it morphed into a kind of madness and caused her to do an unthinkable act in the deluded belief she was saving her children from a far worse fate than living an unrighteous life here on earth. To understand this belief system, we need to step into Andrea's shoes for a moment, get into her mind and explore what led her down this dark path and what were the things that contributed to this heartbreaking event on this fateful day. Andrea's earlier life was picture perfect. She excelled at school, captained the swim team, and graduated with a nursing degree. Her nursing colleagues at MD Anderson Hospital in Houston spoke very, very highly of her. And she adored her children. She loved them dearly. She also homeschooled her children, and this is where we get our first clue, because there is a suggestion that homeschooling was forced onto Andrea by her husband Rusty. There was an undeniable tension in the marriage, as Andrea's friends described Rusty as a controlling, critical and demanding person. He wanted a large family and for Andrea to be a flawless supermum, which of course is impossible. Even Andrea's own mum described changes in her after a marriage as Andrea having lost her sense of self, or she seemed to think that Andrea had shrunk away from her past outgoing self. Rusty's expectations just seem to have left Andrea feeling lost, and it's as if Andrea wasn't Andrea anymore. Andrea's mental health took a turn for the worst, and doctors came up with several medical labels for what was wrong with her. But I think the one that makes the most sense here is postnatal psychosis. Why? Because Andrea's mental health problems only kicked in after she had her first child. So, what exactly is postnatal psychosis? Imagine you're hearing voices that aren't there, like whispers or even full blown conversations, or maybe believing things are true that are not true, or thinking that your body is possessed by a demon. This is what psychosis is like. But here's the thing. It isn't mum's fault when this happens, because it could be a genetic problem, or it might be hormones going haywire, or it might be the whole ordeal of giving birth that messes up a woman's body. The point here is that experiencing delusions caused by childbirth is not a choice. It just happens. To figure out what happened that day when Andrea drowned her children, we need to step into her mind and start seeing things from her perspective. Right from the very beginning, Andrea's only motive was to save the souls of her children. She believed firmly in her heart of hearts that Satan was holding sway over her by putting thoughts in her head to drown her 5 children. Andrea was fully aware that this was sinful and that society would judge her as being bad if she did that. What was at the root of Andrea's belief? Well, Andrea thought that Satan wanted her children in hell, and that somehow Satan's desires to take her children was solely caused by what she had done or not done. In her words, the children were not righteous, meaning that the children had not developed right, and if she didn't drown them, they would be destined for hell. In order to defeat Satan, she had to take the lives of her children, and she firmly believed this. If you think Andrea had a belief like this, you'd think that she might tell everybody, right? Well, Andrea was terrified because she thought if she even spoke the words aloud, Satan would hear them and use them against her. Deep down, Andrea knew that drowning her children was horribly wrong, but then Satan would take over, and then somehow not drowning them was even worse. It was like her mind was saying, if you don't do this terrible thing and drown my children, I will mess up their lives forever. It just doesn't make any sense, does it? This is the terrifying part of psychosis because it can turn good and evil completely upside down. But here's the thing. Andrea actually tried to kill herself twice because of these thoughts. It seems like the opposite of wanting to hurt the kids, doesn't it? But in her head, she thought sacrificing herself was going to be better than harming her children. It's like her love for the children was so strong, it skewed every belief in her mind. In 2002, when the tragedy happened, Andrea's mind was in a dark place. She believed with all her heart that drowning her children would somehow save their souls. It was like she was trapped in this terrible nightmare where there were only bad options. But here's the thing, what she did wasn't right. It was the heartbreaking result of Andrea's mental illness. Andrea's delusions were all over the map. Even though she knew she was drowning the kids would seem awful to everyone, she truly believed that they'd go to hell if she didn't do it. It's like she thought society and even God wouldn't understand the bigger picture of what was going on, that she was saving them from internal hell. This is exactly what psychosis is like in someone's mind. This is a stark reminder of how mental illness can distort reality. If you know someone who's struggling, please reach out. I've left some links below in the description to some mental health resources. Andrea's actions had legal consequences, and the first trial resulted in a sentence of life imprisonment. But the second trial took a surprising turn. This time, the second jury said not guilty because of insanity. So what's the difference between the two trials? Well, in the first trial, there was a death-qualified jury, meaning that the jurors were not categorically opposed to the death penalty. But at the same time, they didn't believe that the death penalty should be given in every instance. It just means that they wouldn't automatically sentence somebody to death, which is the reason why they gave Andrea life in prison instead. As Todd Frank, the jury foreman for the first trial said, "We understand she knew it was legally wrong, but in her deluded mind, we believed she thought that she was doing the right thing." The media also plays a massive role in shaping our views on insanity. Sensationalised stories can make it seem like everyone's using the defence just to avoid doing time or the death sentence. And there's also the belief that the insanity defence is like a magic escape route from facing jail time or the death penalty. But is that the reality? The truth is, the insanity defence is really used. It's just not easy to prove in law. And because of this, it's only used in about 1% of all cases. The sad truth here is that Andreayates was clearly suffering from a severe mental illness when she drowned her children. It's heartbreaking all around. Even if the legal system forgives Andrea by finding her insane, she will never forgive herself, because 5 months after this terrible tragedy, and after being on antipsychotic medication, Andrea could no longer understand or even recall that she was fulfilling a biblical prophecy. Nor could she understand her belief that her own execution would cause the death of Satan. Have a listen to this reporter as he asks Andrea, if you knew you were going to kill your kids, would this have happened?
If you knew you were going to kill the kids, would this have happened?
No,
Okay. Why not?
he wouldn't have left me alone with the children. And just waited till after he left and started to fill the tub.
What was going on before then?
That's all I thought about.
Was
Drowning them.
That's really sad. What a terrible tragedy this has been, and potentially avoidable. Andrea just needed help. The insanity defence isn't about getting away with a crime, it's about making sure justice is served, and that includes getting help for people who are just too sick to be responsible for their actions. As we conclude this journey through Andreayates' tragic story, let's reflect on the important lessons we've learned and the actions we can take to prevent similar tragedies happening in the first place. At the heart of this story is a loving mother who simply had a mental illness and a tragedy that could have been prevented. I know this story will linger and it'll stay with us for a number of years to come, but there is a key takeaway here. Mental illness can take many forms, and sometimes it can lead to awful consequences. If you are struggling, please reach out for help, because getting help is a sign of strength, not weakness. I encourage you to check out the resources below in the description. Andreayates' story is a stark reminder that the justice system isn't always black and white. The insanity defence exists for a reason, and in this case, it ensured Andrea received the mental health treatment she so desperately needed. We can't change what happened, but we can learn from it. Let's work together to raise awareness about mental health and break the stigma surrounding it. Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Until next time, remember, every mum needs support. Take care.